call the
We'll talk about
meeting of the, I guess it's continuation of the meeting of the Anchorage Election Commission to order. We are, in our agenda, we are right at the presentation of what I have called the Omnibus Complaint. Ms. Vasquez was scheduled to have 5 minutes to do it, and just before we go to that, so we have some administrative things to take care of. Mr. Jones.
Excuse me, Mr. Lehman. I want to prepare you for this. Here is the agenda that I emailed you. You need to follow this agenda. So basically what happened is, you were reviewing the pending rejected ballot envelopes, and we went to those complaints, but now you have to come back and finish this review because we have to go, you have to finish this, then we have to go through your report for you to sign, and then you can come and do these complaints, but we have to do this first.
And we have to do this because time-wise, you're running out of time to do the report. Is that correct?
That is correct. It
Okay.
will give you options later in your meeting. If you don't do this, you have no options.
All right. I am going to sit corrected, and in terms of the order of our agenda today, instead of taking that item up, Ms. Vasquez, right now we are going to go to completion of the public session of the canvass. And I think the first thing we ought to do is call the roll and just affirm that we have a quorum, which we do just by sight. We have a full commission to go ahead and call the roll.
Very good, Mr. Chair. Glennis Ireland. Elaine Nelson. Here. Lauren Lehman.
Here.
Meade Treadwell.
Here.
Lisa Torkelson. Here. You have a quorum.
Okay, Ms. Jones, did you want to lead with these items?
I would.
Military? Okay.
Thank you very much. So you do have this lovely new chart because this got a little bit complicated, so I hope this is easier to follow. The good news is that there are no military and overseas ballots that were received by noon today that need rejection. Thus, we can move on to number B to complete any remaining issues, including what was 205 no sig match envelopes. And at the same time, we're going to be looking at number C, any other remaining issues on the rejection or acceptance of the ballots. So if you will take a look at your large spreadsheet, what we're going to do here is just so that you know what's happening here, the first column, which I will call, I don't know, I think that must be, well, I don't know what it is. It says reject code from 418 worksheet. So then at the meeting on 418, if you ordered us to do something, that was in that second column. And so now we have a new total. And so that everything up to the subtotal column is done. So now today we need to talk about the things that are in the recommendations rejects for 426. If there's a 0, it means you don't have to do any action. So the first category that we need to take action on today is duplicate ballot voted. This is reject code D. There is one additional envelope in this reject code. Interestingly, one of the special needs ballot envelopes that you ordered us to count, the person had already voted. So now we are adding one to this code. So it is my understanding that what we would be asking the commission to do is to approve the staff recommendation to reject one additional envelope in Reject Code D, duplicate voted ballot, for a total of 8 duplicate voted ballots.
Is there any objection to accepting the staff recommendation for rejecting the duplicate ballot? Hearing none, request granted.
Thank you. The next category that does not have a 0 is all the way down at W, ballot postmarked after Election Day. There were an additional 10 envelopes that we have received since the last public session of Canvas, and so we would like the commission to move to approve staff's recommendation to accept an additional 10 ballots that were postmarked after Election Day for a total of 411.
I guess we'll take it by motion. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay. Commissioner Treadwell moves. Commissioner Ireland seconds. Is there any discussion?
Just one question, Mr. Chairman. Were any of these ballots international ballots?
No, the international ballots were processed.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Is there any objection to the motion? Without objection, motion passes, and those ballots will be rejected.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. The next category is, do you want to do that one? Can you explain that one?
Sure. So on the night of the public session of Canvas, we had initially thought that you had 402 ballots postmarked after Election Day. And when we went through, we discovered that one of them actually was not postmarked at all. And so that's, you'll see in W that there's 402, but then it ultimately ends up being 401 before we added the additional 10. So the 1 is now in the commission ordered adjusted, is what that means. And so it's in the second column. We've received a second one in the past few days. And so our staff recommendation is to reject one additional no postmarked but received after Election Day for a total of 2.
Can you tell us what day you received it?
Today?
The one that we would be rejecting?
Yes.
Received today?
Correct.
And it was received by mail?
Yes.
Okay.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Treadwell. Commissioner Nelson, seconds. Any discussion? Is there any objection to the motion? Without objection, motion passes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. The next category that you do not have a 0 is in category Z, voter failed to sign ballot return envelope. And in this code, we had one additional ballot envelope that we received since your last meeting that the voter had failed to sign the ballot return envelope. And so staff would recommend that the commission reject this one envelope for a total of 45 envelopes to be rejected for code Z.
I so move.
Second.
Commissioner Nelson moves. Commissioner Treadwell seconds. Is there any discussion?
Yeah. Is there any indication there was a mark?
Through the chair, this envelope is a little bit interesting. The signature is not signed by the voter. there's no witness name. There is a witness signature, but it's not the same person. It's not the voter. So it's like if the envelope was to Barbara Jones, it was signed by John Jones. So the witness signature is John Jones, but there's no signature, there's no X.
And the second question, Mr. Chairman, is why did it get here so late?
Because the ballot was delivered to us from the State of Alaska Division of Elections. They found the envelope in their parking lot.
Okay, and had the voter voted errantly on the wrong line and the signature matched, you probably would have accepted that, even though it's not on the voter line, it was on the witness line.
Could you repeat that one more time,
Is it-
Mr. Lehman?
Theoretically, if that voter had voted errantly on the witness line instead of the voter line, and you found that as a match, you probably would have accepted that.
We most likely would have accepted it. If we had any concerns, we may have brought that to you to make that decision, because there may be a question if the person was subscribing to the oath of office or the voter declaration, but I think you're probably correct. That wouldn't have been a big issue for us. This is just clear. It wasn't signed by the voter.
Okay. Is there a motion to accept staff recommendation on
So moved.
We have the motion, and now we just need to vote.
we have the motion? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we have the motion, we just need to vote.
Okay. Is there any more discussion on it? Any objection to the motion? Without objection, the motion carries, and that ballot will be rejected.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you if I can skip Z1 and go to Z2, because Z1 is so complicated. I'd like to see if we can get through Z1. So, for no reference signature, there were 17 in this category. You asked us to resend cure letters, and we did resend 14 cure letters because 3 of them had witness signatures, and we were ready to count those based on your decision to count witness signatures, and 1 had ID inside of it. So that person totally cured, right? They cured themselves. So now we have basically 3 cures. In addition, we actually got 2. So it was a great decision that you made for us to resend those letters, because of the 17 or 14, 2 got back to us with cures. So we cured a total of 3. The 2 that got back to us because of the letters, and the 1 that had ID. So now we're down to 14. So now the commission has an option. They can vote to reject 14 of those envelopes, and there are now 2 that have witness signatures on them, or the commission can vote to reject 12, and then we would be counting the 2 with witnessing. Oh, I think that's just the opposite, isn't it?
You'd be counting the ones that cured.
Yes, no, the cure is 14, so your options are, you're going to have to make the decision to either, are you going to count envelopes with witness signatures where there's no reference signature on file, or do you want to reject those? So this is a policy decision.
How could these be registered voters without a reference signature?
I do not know the answer to that, Mr. Treadwell, or Mr. Lehman. I'm sorry, I do not know the answer to that. But we did contact the state of Alaska and asked for a reference signature, and they said they do not have one. So I don't know if it could be that the voter registered and the voter registration is on microfiche, for example, and they may not be able to pull the microfiche for us. It could be that it's a voter that doesn't have a driver's license, or doesn't have a state ID, so they haven't gone to the DMV. So for anybody, even if you apply for a PFD, the PFD is just signature on file. I mean, we don't sign anymore since the first time you apply. So we do not know why there is no reference signature on file for these voters.
What's the pleasure of the commission? Commissioner Torkelson.
So if we do number 1 with those rejecting 12 and counting 2, would those 2 go up in the Z1 area that we're still yet to deal with?
No, there's still no ref sig. So you get to, if you want to delay this decision and make it with respect to Z1, I thought this would be easier, but it may not be. It's totally up to the commission.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, the big question is whether or not the reference signature, the absence of your current signature or the absence of the state not having your signature, which could be the state's problem, not your problem, disenfranchises you. And so I request that we handle Z2 after we handle Z1, because I believe we got a consistency there.
Any objection going back to the originally presented order? Okay, let's go to Z1.
Okay, so here we got a little bit of math here. So we started with 706 at your last meeting. We thought we had 205 that ended up having witness signatures, but 9 of those got pulled because 8 did not have witness signatures and 1 was a request to be removed. So now we've got 196 that you ordered us to count. So the difference is now we've got 510 envelopes. And we got 14 cures. Those came in before the public session of canvass. We just didn't get them pulled out of the group. So now there's 496. So the question is, would the commission like to reject 496 envelopes for no sig match on the ballot return envelope, or would the commission like to reject the total of 692 no sig matches on the envelopes? And the difference is the 196 envelopes with witness signatures.
I'm going to just clarify for the commission, and I believe the word is correct in here, reconsider, because our meeting has been a continuation of our meeting on Monday, and because we did not adjourn, a reconsideration is available to us instead of rescinding. And if there's no objection from the other commissioners, I move to reconsider our vote on the previous Monday, where we directed staff to count what was then, I believe, 205, now would be 196 votes. And if that motion passes, then the issue will be before us. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Second by Commissioner Nelson. Does everybody understand what this is? Yeah. And I will, if I could under debate, I'll just say this one.
Ask if there's no objection once you've got the motion.
Oh, is there any objection to the motion to reconsider our vote? Okay, without objection, that motion carries, and we have before us the issue, and I guess I better do it this way. I move to direct staff to reject those 196 ballots. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Ireland. Under discussion. Let me explain. This one's difficult for me because I believe some, perhaps many of those ballots are from ballot voters. But the instructions are clear, and they say if you are unable to sign, make a mark and have it witnessed. Those people obviously were able to sign. They did, but their signatures don't match. There probably are a number of reasons for that I don't need to get into, but they didn't follow the rules. And then the second reason really has, I guess it had to do with the legal reason that we were explaining. Maybe Ralph, you went through the legal reason yesterday. At any rate, it's I believe it opens us up for more for potential fraud, and I don't want that. So I'm willing to, I guess, give up those votes, even though they may be from legitimate voters. Are there any other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Torkelson.
Question is, if we would move to, or keep these, or vote to keep these as, if we move to count these ballots, is it possible to count them but not upload the signatures that were not verified by other state matches, or whatever, however you want to state that?
Through the chair, Mr. Treadwell asked me that question at your last meeting, and I'm going to tell you no. The way the system works is that the envelopes are processed through the system, and we do a bulk upload to the state. All 70,000 signatures that were added are uploaded to the state. There's no way to pick and choose signatures out of the database.
But did I hear it wrong yesterday that if...
Could you use the microphone? I can't
Sorry.
hear that here. Thank you.
Did I mishear yesterday that if we rescind our previous action or change our mind, that each of those signatures need to go in and be pulled?
That is correct. But let me let you know what that means. You have a choice. The signature is good, or the signature is no match. And so that affects the total numbers, and it affects the database. So if you say it's good, the photo goes up. If you say it's not good, the signature doesn't go up.
Yeah, I earlier zoned out on my second reason that I remembered as being very significant, and just for the crowd, it has to do with this database of uploading signatures, and if we're uploading a bad signature, it then could be available for the future, and I'm concerned about that. So for me, Those two reasons are compelling. I don't like to disenfranchise a legitimate voter, but if I don't know who that is, basically for me, I have no other choice. I want integrity in an election and future election. Mr. Treadwell.
Yeah, it's easier when I'm in the same room to look you all in the eye. I'm going to say that I've been involved one way or another in a number of disputed elections. It was a very contentious primary between Wally Hickle and Jay Hammond in 1978. And decisions made essentially in a canvassing or a recount process ended up becoming precedent that you later had to fix by legislation, and it caused a court case. So I'm just very aware that of a couple of things. First off, if we don't set a precedent now, it's probably better than later. And I hadn't thought about that as much last time when we voted. The second thing I want to say about this is that I felt comfortable voting for this before because I was fairly sure that whatever we did wouldn't change the result of the election, but would at least franchise those people who were perhaps being disenfranchised because they didn't know which of their signatures was on the state database. And I'll be honest about that. My name is Louis Meade Treadwell II. I have a Louis Meade Treadwell II signature. I've got a Meade Treadwell signature. I've got an M Treadwell signature. I've got an L Treadwell signature. I have no idea what's on the state's database. Okay? And I think it's unfair for me to put down to be disenfranchised if my signature doesn't match what's on that database, especially if I haven't been shown what that is. And my signature probably went on that database 20, 25 years ago. So here we are setting up a standard where we're trying to protect ourselves against fraud, but we're not helping those who can do it. So that was the reason why I voted to not disenfranchise those people, because it wasn't their fault. The other thing that I'll just say is that I think we all should know that had this been a very tighter election, I see a couple of candidates here, the position that those campaigns are taking today might be exactly the opposite, because it's those kinds of things that your lawyers tell you is how you help add more votes to the count. And we're not supposed to decide based on that. We're supposed to decide on that. But I'm telling you that if these elections have been closer, I guarantee you'd be in here armed with a pile of lawyers telling us that we had to count those votes, and with affidavits from the voters and everything else saying, "Don't throw my vote out." And that's what happens. So for that reason, I think it's important not to set a precedent today too, because in a tight election you'll have it. But that's I think the other point is the courts tend to if somebody were to sue us for rejecting these today, I think the courts would overturn us. It's just generally what the courts do. They tend to put the burden of proof on the voter, and if anybody else screws up, the post office or the people who have the database or anything else like that, the voter still gets to vote. So that's generally how court cases have come down. The other thing that confused me about this is I myself voted in this election, and I waited to mail in my envelope until I got my assistant back from out with COVID or whatever made it so that he and I weren't in the office at the same time before he could sign it. And I thought we needed a signature. And I read the fine print, and it says, "By signing above, I affirm I'm 18 years of age on the date of election. I'm notary public or another person that authorized to administer oaths. And I further affirm that the person named on the envelope and marking the envelope is known to me, was unable to sign, and has signed a mark." So in other words, all of those witness signatures, somebody has sworn that person signed a mark. And so therefore I can't now accept those signatures as a mark. Because we're accepting that this person has signed an oath and it's not really a mark. But when we have our conversation about investigations afterwards, there are a couple of cases where we might have them. So, Madam Chair, I guess my question on this is I'll support the motion to not count the ones that had an unmatched signature but did have a witness. But I do think we should look at that stack some more as part of the law enforcement discussion that we agreed we would have later on, if you can preserve those ballots, if you can preserve those options.
I think there's already a motion.
Mine is a question first. If you can tell us to be done, I'll make the supplementary motion. But
I think you've already given us a motion to keep everything that's being rejected.
okay.
And-
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll support your motion. I do it, and I'd like the record to reflect this, I do it not to disenfranchise voters who thought they were doing properly, but to do it as one argument that we should have more in-person elections, and two, we should have ballots that go out based on a signature where somebody requests a ballot, and number three, we can't leave the integrity of our elections based on something that's so uncertain the voter didn't even know which signature to put in.
Clerk Jones.
I know you're ready to vote, but I would like to offer a field trip for you, Commissioner Treadwell, and we would like to go on a field trip and go take a look at the signature verification at some time you're here. And we would like to show you there are up to 5 signatures for each voter in the database. It could be your signature from your last ballot. It could be from an absentee ballot recently with the state. It could be your original voter registration. It could be your driver's license. We have someone who got a trailer, registered a trailer at DMV, and that signature is in the file. We can see it in the little snippet. So there are lots of signatures, and we can talk a little bit about how we can tell, even if you sign B. Jones, Barb Jones, Barbara Jones, how we can match those.
And I very much support signature verification. The only problem with it is, I'll take the field trip, but I've taken part of it already. But I will say that we also have a situation where it doesn't say here on voter signature, be sure to put the same signature that you have on your driver's license or something else on the state. I mean, we're disenfranchising. I'm sure that in these several hundred ballots, there's people who thought they were putting in the right signature. Nobody told them that it had to match something that was on their driver's license. Nobody told them anything of the sort except by reading the code. And I guess all I'm saying is, in a very close election, the courts might overturn the decision that I'm advocating we take today. That's all. So you've done the right thing. You've done the best you have with what's available to you. The voter didn't have the information available to them. They thought they were being franchised. They're being disenfranchised because their new signature doesn't match their old signature. And who knew?
Well, through the chair, we can discuss that more offline.
Right.
I know that of these 706, you invited them to come in and cure their lack of match, and they did not.
Correct.
I am going to suggest that we offer them the opportunity to get a legitimate signature on file, so for future elections, that they will at least be able to have a match if that's a signature. That, of course, means another piece of correspondence, but it's probably worth it in the big picture to make sure these people have a chance to become, if they're legitimate voters, to have a chance to actually exercise their right to vote. And I also recognize that they should have responded to the letters. I mean, you can only do so much. What's the line? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, and I know you've tried.
So, Commissioners, I wanted to remind you, we do have some pretty strict deadlines here if we could get through the canvas. I don't mean to rush you, but we do have a deadline to get through the canvas.
Well, I do mean to rush us,
No.
but But this is an important one right here. Is there further discussion from commissioners?
I just have a
Commissioner
question.
Torkelson?
I believe with the state election, a witness signature is required. Correct. So there may be also some confusion with maybe me that he thought he had to have a witness sign it, and that could be because the state does it one way and the community does it another way. Correct. So maybe that would be something in the future to consider is make them the same. People in Anchorage are also voting in the state, and if they have one rule for one thing and one rule for another thing, then it causes voter confusion and as a result disenfranchisement. However you say that word.
And any other commission discussion? I am almost reluctantly going to go to the one hand I saw. Sir, if you can keep it really brief.
Keep my microphone.
Identify yourself, please, even though we've come to know you.
In a good way.
Yeah.
Dan Smith, observer for Liz Vasquez. I just wanted to point out that with as with the ballots themselves, the cure letters have no means of tracking, and there's no means of deciphering whether or not that person actually received that letter. I do not believe they are sent out certified or return receipt requested, so they may or may not have got the cure letter. It's just a...
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Without further discussion, is there any objection to the motion? Hearing none, the motion passes, and those 196 ballots will not be counted.
So, Mr. Chair, I think we need a further motion to reject
For a total of 6.
for a total of 692 ballot envelopes that will be rejected for reject code Z1, no signature match on the envelope.
I thought we did that Monday of last week.
No, Mr. Chair, you did not make that motion because we didn't know exactly what the number was. So what you did was you told us to count the ones with witness signatures, and then we were to come back to you and let you know what the number was. And so today we're ready to tell you that the number is it 692?
692.
692.
The total number is 692, which includes the 196 that we just
That is correct.
rejected.
Yes.
Okay, you want a separate motion? You want us to go back and amend the other motion? It doesn't really matter.
Just
Okay.
a separate motion would be great.
Okay, we have a motion to clarify that the total number rejected will be 692, which includes the 196 that we just advised the staff not to count. Commissioner Nelson, is that your motion? Okay, thank you.
Second.
You move. I didn't see somebody else. Is there a second? Commissioner Ireland seconds. Any discussion on that? Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, the motion carries.
Okay, now we're back to this more difficult category that I thought might, but anyway, you understand that we have 17 no ref sigs, 3 were cured, so there are a total of 14 in this category. And the commission can either reject all 14, which would be consistent with your prior motion.
Just a question.
Commissioner Torkelson.
Little confusion on what the difference is between Z1 and Z2. No reference signature, meaning there is nothing on file anywhere in the state of Alaska. And no signature match is they've got a bunch of signatures and nothing matches it.
So through the chair, Ms. Torkelson, the difference is I can't say that there's nothing in the state of Alaska. There's no signature. That we do not have access to that information. we have access to the State of Alaska voter registration database. We also have access to the Division of Elections. So the process that happens is we have all of the signatures for each voter, up to 5 per voter. And for these 17 voters, there are no signatures of those 5. In addition, whenever we have a no ref sig, we contact the State of Alaska Division of Elections, and we showed you those emails that showed you that we contacted them. And the state got back to us on some of them and provided reference signatures for some voters. We uploaded those to the database. For these 17, or now 14, they said, I'm sorry, we don't have anything. That's the Division of Elections. The Division of Elections has access to PFD, DMV, and probably other resources. But that was the answer that they gave us.
Commissioner Treadwell, seeking the floor.
Yeah. The law says that we have to match it against a database, and if there's not something in the database, I don't know how to make that a presumption of the voter's fault. I think the presumption, at least until I know differently, is that the state messed up. And so I would say that if this were a close court case, I would imagine the court would count them. I think it's. Let me just put it this way, in terms of almost everything we've got. We threw out a whole lot of ballots because the post office didn't do their job on time. We're throwing out some ballots because the state didn't do its job on time. And our job is to try to convince voters to vote and make that meaningful. And, you know, I see candidates here who work like crazy to get people out to vote. Now we're throwing out 1% of the vote. And there's a lot of elections that get turned on less than 1% of the vote. So it's, in my mind, it's tough to disenfranchise somebody because the state didn't do something, not because they didn't do something. Now, if they didn't ever come in and sign a signature, we wouldn't have been allowed to count their vote anyway because they would have been a no vote without an ID. That you've got a category on that, if I'm not mistaken. Where somebody registers online, you can't vote until you've shown an ID to somebody. So, again, my presumption is the state messed up here, not the voter. So I would vote to count these because I think it'd be a bad precedent to disenfranchise people when the state messes up. We'll talk about the post office later.
Oh, sorry.
I'm trying to remember, I registered a voter, it must have been a year ago, just before the deadline, and we did it online, which then tells me that there wasn't must not have been a signature required. It probably had to provide other sources of ID, like a driver's license number or social security number, something verify they are who they say they are. But I've been thinking that you have to have the signature when you register to vote. That used to be the case, and maybe now with automatic voter registration on a permanent fund dividend application, and if that is electronic signature, it's quite possible that there are some people slipping through who don't have the signature on file. And my suggestion, I guess whatever we decide right now would be to alert those people that they need to have a signature on file, which would then aid them for future voting.
Through the chair, we do have a signature letter that we could send to voters to say, please respond to this and update your signature. It's just a little half sheet, and you just flip it and sign it and return it, and then we upload that. So, which is what we do with the cure letters.
Yeah. So, just a quick question on that. Do you have any idea how many of our 300,000 registered voters in Anchorage you don't have a signature for?
I do not.
Okay, and that machine can't tell you how many they don't have anything on?
If it does, I don't know that.
Okay. Yeah, well, that'd be good to know as we work on an overall cure for this thing. Jamie, if the notes on today's meeting can note that we're going to try to figure that out, that'd be good.
Well, I'm glad that there are only, 17, I guess, of the total that got exposed this time. That number is fairly small, but of course, the vote for those 17 people, if they're legitimate, is important to them.
Yeah.
We've seen lots of elections, less than 17 votes.
Okay, we need to take action. Time is marching on.
Do you need a motion, Mr.
We
Chairman?
need a motion, and to be consistent with what we just did before, I think it's the second option is how we'd be consistent. Is that correct? Is that your interpretation as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's consistent with the letter of the procedure that says you have to match the signature. But in this case, on Z1, we had a signature that didn't match, even though there was a witness. On Z2, we didn't have a signature to match it to, so it's not necessarily consistent, Mr. Chairman. And, with Z1, if the presumption is the voter should know what his or her signature was on the database, because that is the presumption in our rejection of Z1, or in the way the code is written. I think it could go either way on Z2, but I personally will vote against disenfranchising these people because it's not their fault. The state doesn't have their signature. If I win or lose, it's still something we have to cure, but I'm going to vote against it if that's what the motion is.
Do we have a motion to put before the commission?
And move that we count the 14.
Second.
Commissioner Torkelson moves that we count 14, and Commissioner Treadwell seconds. Is there discussion? Clerk Jones.
Through the chair, please remember that two of those have witnesses, but that probably doesn't matter because there's 14 people that don't have a signature in the database. Okay, so 14.
Yeah, the witness doesn't bail them out unless they were X's.
Right, and just as a reminder from Monday's, the 18th public session of Canvas, we were directed to do the 3 that were witnessed, not the entire 14, not the entire group. So this is now adding more that didn't have witness signatures, just for clarification.
Is there further discussion among commissioners, from commissioners? I'm going to go to the audience and ask, is there anyone who wants to comment about this? Because we've had some very good comments from observers and candidates. Is there anyone who wants to comment? You don't have to. Go ahead.
My name is John Henry. I'm with Randy Salt. I think those that were cleared should be counted and the rest should be not counted. And another point too, and one other point I want to say, I would like to know how many voters have a signature on file with the community and how many vote packages went out for those voters. I'd like to know what that differential is, because that might help in determining how many voters that don't have signatures on file based against how many ballots went out.
Is there any further discussion? Are we ready to vote? Jamie, you want to call the roll?
So this is a vote to count the 14 ballots in category Z2. This is a vote to count.
Yes. Mr. Lehman?
No.
Ms. Ireland?
No.
Ms. Nelson?
No.
Ms. Torkelson?
Yes.
Mr. Treadwell?
Yes.
Motion fails.
Motion fails. Do we have another motion for taking action? Or do we interpret that as being the direction is to, well, no, there's still two choices.
You could make a motion, Mr. Lehman. Or a small board, you can make a motion.
I move to accept option 1. Reject 12, count 2.
Mr. Lehman, that's inconsistent with your prior motion. I see, but you want to be inconsistent with your prior motion.
I understand what I'm doing, and
Yes,
I
I do
understand
too.
there may be a slight inconsistency. I see it as being just a little bit different. Perhaps tough to explain.
Nope, I get it. Thank you
Especially
very
later.
much.
Is there a second?
Can you repeat?
I'll second.
Confused.
Move to adopt option 1, which is reject 12, count 2.
Check 12. Didn't we just move to count 14? Or not count 14?
Is there a discussion? Mr. Treadwell?
Yeah. Lauren is my very good friend, and we very, very seldom disagree, but consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, and I have a little mind here. I think we should be consistent with our vote on Z1. If we're not going to franchise anybody who doesn't follow the exact letter of the law, which is have a signature on file with the state, and rely on the signature, not on the witness, and rely only on the witness if there's an X, and the witness is sworn that person can't sign, then I would urge you to reject this motion and vote on option 2.
Well, I'll tell you, I offered that thinking, I'm usually pretty good at counting votes before they take place, and this time I can see that I failed. And if there's no objection, I will ask unanimous consent that I withdraw my previous motion. Hearing no objection, motion's withdrawn. I move to adopt option number 2, which is reject 14 envelopes and be somewhat more consistent, maybe totally more consistent with what we did before. And we need a second.
I'll second it.
Commissioner Nelson seconds. Under discussion. I loathe not counting legitimate voters' ballots. I continue I want to protect people's rights to vote, and when they vote, to count it. But we also have rules that we need to follow to help ensure that we have integrity. And while I have no reason to believe that these people weren't acting with integrity, we need to follow the system we have, and we may want to think about advice to the Assembly for changing the municipal code in this area. Any other discussion? Everybody understand what we're doing?
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, just to record why I'll vote no. It's consistent with my previous argument. This is something where the voter didn't screw up, the state screwed up, is my guess. And so I'll be voting no on your motion, but I will work as closely as I can with every other member of the commission to get it fixed.
Are we ready for the votes? Please call the roll.
Mr. Treadwell,
No.
Ms. Torkelson,
No.
Ms. Nelson,
To not count the votes.
correct.
It's no.
Reject 14
yes.
votes.
Reject. The 14. To reject.
So
And
yes
not
to
count.
reject the 14.
Yes.
Ms. Ireland,
Yes.
Mr. Lehman,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay, we are down to the wire here, the last one. This is our category other, need number 11. There were 23 ballots, and we've listed them all out, what they were. There were 9 that we counted at the last meeting, the special needs and the email ballots. So we ended up with 14, but there's 2 additional ones that we need you to reject. And so I think that we're asking the commission to reject 2 additional ballots for other. One was a person that was no longer living in Alaska, and the second was the duplicate special needs that you told us to count, and then we discovered they'd already voted. So for a total reject of 16 in reject code 11 other.
Let me just ask for clarification on a person not living in Alaska. I'm assuming that means not living here, and no longer a resident of Alaska. I mean, it's possible to live outside Alaska and still be a voter in Alaska. For example, a college student or somebody on temporary employment, somebody working for the State Department in Washington, D.C., somebody in the military. But that is somebody who identifies as living and residing by the legal term of residence somewhere else. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
This particular ballot in question, it appeared to be a signature. They wrote all over the envelope, no longer lives in Alaska, and so then they wrote their name on the signature line, and so it appeared to be a signature, and it was in the no sig match bucket. But when we were going through them again, looking for the witness signatures, it says no longer lives in Alaska, removed from voter rolls. So that will be forwarded to the state for them to do whatever they want to do with it.
Okay. I will move to accept staff recommendation on rejecting these 2 additional ballots, or validated.
For a total of 16.
And Mr. Treadwell seconds. Any discussion? Any objection to the motion? Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. We are done with the public session of canvas portion. The staff needs to go prepare your report, which won't be on 3 pages of ledger paper. And we will prepare that and bring it back for your signature, which we will also be scrambling around here, scanning and tabulating and producing results. And in the meantime, because we have to have all of this done before 5 o'clock when the meeting starts, so you don't have to be done. You may continue. And what I'd like to do, we typically take a break to do this, but I think you've got quite a bit of business, and it would be up to the commission. But I think some of you have seen, Jessica Willoughby's opinion from the municipal attorney's office. And if you would just like to go into that discussion, I don't think you need staff for that. And we can just step away and get the reports done and finish up some of our processing. And we'll be back if you have any questions for us.
And where is the Willoughby that's coming?
Oh, I do not know.
Okay.
I've got copies here.
Oh, okay.
Are you suggesting going to that first or going to Ms. Vasquez?
No, I think you have to do, well, the omnibus complaint is from Ms. Vasquez. So
Right.
yeah.
And this Willoughby has to do with that issue?
Yes, she
Oh.
wrote a legal opinion
Okay.
for you on that.
Okay.
So the top handout here is, that is the Omnibus Complaint, and this one is Ms. Willoughby's response. And then later on in your agenda, you have 4 renewed, and those are, staff's response, and the 4 renewed are in this file.
Okay. Let's take about a 5 to 7 minutes break, and then we can do that, and maybe spend a few minutes looking at materials, then we'll get started.
This is the Omnibus Complaint. This is 4 renewed claims, and that's very front.
Is that a split?
So we have the Omnibus. From the servers, we have a memo.
Nice, yeah. Too bad her hearing is-
Does that make sense?
Should we go?
Yeah. Okay, so this is Ms. Willoughby's response. This is the Omnibus Complaint. Yeah. This is, 4 renewed.
It's good for us. I do this thing. We'll like it. That sounds, it's been our worthy. It's definitely, our going to your house, you get stumble homework on it. Okay? It's going. I get to stumble up the hill and down. No, it's our condolences. Okay. That's kind of cool. Yeah. And he was
Like this her name,
So are we gonna go over the?
I think we have one. So now.
Unless the dash. But the reason why I noticed that is because it's kind of like, did you ever read Catch 22? Catch 22 was Jason Farrell that talked about stamp bureaucracies. They'll set a stamp, you can't move the stamp. They'll set a stamp. Or it's on Wait a second, I was in your country 2 days. You're all somewhere. These songs are where I am because that's how you realize our system works. It's when government set up standards. Like, government says your signature has to match. That's why your signature. What did you have a profession? How many years?
My signature, I mean, that's my signature in Washington.
Especially when I'm signing on one of those electronic.
I know. Yeah, I mean, I would be the one my ballot. Hear it, 'cause I lived in it.
What she's saying is yeah. So
Lakita.
Lakita.
And one of her dispatches was the pharmacy said that she don't have any voice. I didn't even came in. I said, Lakita, that's her mom. That would be a racist comment. Yeah, probably would be.
Okay.
And she says she wears different legs.
Yep, the red light's still on. You're good.
The passport is Lakita.
And Jamie, would you correct.
I thought it was demo one. Let me get.
I have 1 to 2:30 on my calendar, but
Yeah, it's 1 to 2:30, and so if they want to extend, they need to extend.
Edith and Patsy.
in an hour.
Huh? I had my identity stolen. I told her when she was done using Joy. Because people look at me. Joy is like, she's 93. She really is 93. Well, I guess she's been changing the meeting for the library. Well, that was a good decision.
The commission will come back to order, and our first item of business is we will need to vote on extending. We are scheduled right now to be done by 2:30, and that is highly unlikely. So I'd like a motion to extend from 2:30, let's say, to 3:30. Okay, Commissioner Nelson moves to extend to 3:30. Commissioner Ireland seconds. Is there any objection? Hearing none, motion carries, and we are extended to 3:30. The next item of business is what I have termed the Omnibus Complaint that was carried over from yesterday. And at the time, we anticipated a legal response from the Municipal Attorney's Office, which we have. And the presentation, at least the initial presentation, is by Ms. Vasquez. And Liz, are you ready to begin your testimony?
Yes,
Okay,
I need a
microphone.
Yeah. For the record, Liz Vasquez, candidate for District 3. But my concerns go beyond being a candidate. I do believe very passionately in the integrity of the voting process. Is a fundamental right of our society to have a voting system that is above suspicion. The community deserves that. The candidates deserve that. Yesterday, the commission met on April 26th, April 25th, and I submitted to the commission a summary and a request to deny certification of the election results, request for a hand count of ballots. Before I proceed, I want to say that there's a big emphasis that an allegation needs to be sufficient to change the result of the election. But there were so many complaints during this election process, over 30, that it does indicate there is a broken system putting in question election results. One may argue that there may not be a single complaint that may alter the outcome of the elections. However, a pattern of many lax and inappropriate procedures / practices and behavior could add up to make a total difference in an election. The complaints at a minimum are sufficient to request broad systematic changes to the electoral process in the city of Anchorage. It should be noted that no complaints were filed by the incumbent candidates. In addition, there were no observers representing the incumbent candidates. And I put in parentheses, with the exception of 2 brief visits of 1 observer. So the individual complaints, although I do believe there are 2 complaints that could possibly change the results of this election, there's just a broad quilt work or patchwork. It's like presenting a case before a judge. It's not one single fact that may make the case, although I think we have a smoking gun here, given that there was an unfettered bowl access to the Dominion server without notice to the campaigns, without notice to the observers, without notice to the commission. That to me is a smoking gun because we do not know what flash drive, what was in that flash drive, what was done to the machine. It could possibly have erased traces of misdeeds or what have you. But, you know, the Assembly has scheduled the certification of the election today, the same day that the Commission is required to finish the canvass. And it is requested that the Commission recommend to the Assembly to delay the certification of the election. To date, the Election Commission does not have adequate information and data at this time to reach a thoughtful and correct decision with regard to the results of this election. The municipal clerk has not provided the actual complaints with her responses and has delayed sending her responses to the Commission, which has provided little time for the Commission to have thoughtful consideration. In addition, during the April 25th meeting, which happened yesterday, the municipal clerk stated she will not be providing the Commission with the requested statistical data on the election. The municipal clerk has stated that the risk limiting audit would not be conducted until May 17th, weeks after the election is supposed to be certified. Although this type of audit has deficiencies and does not replace an audit with actual voter ballots, it should be conducted before the election is certified. It is a farce to have this audit done weeks after the certification. Why would you have an audit after the election is certified? It's ridiculous. It defies common sense. It's rather insulting for those candidates and those observers and those volunteers that worked so hard over months, and for those people that contributed to our campaigns. The Commission should know the results of this type of audit before recommending the certification of the election. Thus, it is absurd to have this audit weeks after the election is certified. For all the reasons I have just stated, the Commission does not have sufficient information, data, and time to accurately assess the results of the election. Accordingly, it is premature to recommend certification of this election. The Election Commission should recommend to the Assembly that the certification of this election is delayed, to be delayed. And I did, in my summary yesterday, lay out your statutory duties. It is true that the Assembly actually certifies the elections, but you have the duty to make recommendations to the Assembly and to the municipal clerk. You act in an advisory capacity to the Assembly municipal clerk in the conduct of elections. You study and recommend to the Assembly and municipal clerk proposed ordinance relating to elections. You serve as the canvass board for municipal elections. If requested by the Assembly, you investigate election contents and report to the Assembly its findings. You make other studies and recommendations relating to elections and perform such other duties as the Assembly may assign you. And you review or adjudicate the preliminary rejection of question and absentee ballots. And finally, you review the results of the election tabulation provided by the municipal clerk's office. So it's within your jurisdiction to determine whether there is sufficient information data to proceed with a certification and approval of this election. There are several complaints that, first of all, I have noticed that the municipal clerk appears to be rushing the commission in order to ensure that the certification of the election occurs when the Assembly scheduled it today, April 26th. Moreover, several important responses were sent out only 1 or 2 days before the commission's meeting on Monday, April 25th. In fact, several responses were submitted hours before the meeting, close to midnight before the 10 o'clock morning meeting. This provided the commission members with little time to review the responses to the complaints. And by the way, copies of the actual complaints were not provided to you. Now that I would say is the equivalent of you as judges, as adjudicators, listening to one side of an issue or a situation. It's like a judge just listening to one party, accepting the pleadings for one party, ignoring totally anything the other party may have to say. You have to see with your own eyes what these observers have done over the past 2-3 months. They have been very, very diligent, and they have filed complaints when they believe there was something wrong. So I urge you to review every single complaint, and there are over 30. And some of them raise smaller issues and others raise bigger issues. I just had reviewed this week, did a cursory review of the policies and procedures Election Central has. They do not address a lot of what is in our complaints. They do not address security. By the way, there are statutory violations. There's 2 ordinances or statutes that were violated. The ballots were not mailed out at least 21 days before election day. That's a violation of statute. 2, live streaming is specifically set out in statute. And before our complaint, there was no live streaming 24/7. That's required. So live streaming was not on Sunday, Saturday, and it varied between 9 hours and 18 hours during the work week. But so the election had already, it was already past election day when we had to file a complaint to remedy this. We had to file a complaint because there are boxes all over the place in the secure area, near the secure area. And as you can see, there's not much of a partition or barrier. It's not really a secure area. I mean, you just kind of, I would say the other day I just counted about not more than 12 feet away, maybe 10 feet away. No partition, no security. So the return ballots, those were returned, and I, with my own eyes, I came in on a tour that Tuesday. There was a stack, and there was several stacks. I had someone on the tour was estimating that probably close to 3,000 ballots were just sitting out there, not secured, not inventory. We had to file a complaint. What I'm trying to say is, does the community, do the candidates, do the campaigns constantly have to file complaints to make sure that there is voting integrity going on in this city? I don't think that's fair to place the burden on us. And I will be glad to help and assist the commission go through this process. But this whole operation needs to be overhauled. In my mind, it is really loosey-goosey, as one would say in the vernacular, and does not provide the type of confidence you would want to have in a voting process. And I can tell you that I'm ashamed. I am really ashamed, because I grew up in an era, and I've traveled, so I know what other countries have done and other places in the world do, and they do not believe in voting integrity. In fact, Stalin is credited with always saying, I don't care who votes, I care who counts the votes. But in my mind, and in the mind of many in this community, voting integrity is so important. And you, the commission, are critical to help us go through that process to ensure in the future that future candidates, future campaigns don't have to constantly file complaints just to ensure the basic elements of security. I mean, it's just common sense. In that tour group, there were 9 other people looking at each other. It's like, what, thousands of blank ballots just out there? Well, anyway, it's just unbelievable that we have to go through this whole process, and it's taken a lot of time and energy. And I'm just appalled. I'm ashamed that I haven't become involved in the process before, I have to say. And now that I have, I'm bewildered. I mean, it's worse than I ever suspected. I mean, this is not a secure area. So anyway, some of the concerns, more important, that we do not believe were properly addressed is the voter suppression in the Sand Lake, Jewel Lake areas that happens to be in District 3. There was an observer that contacted 28 homes. 7 of them did not receive ballots. It's about 25%. It is a very small sample. We do not have the resources. It's not fair to place the burden on us to do a full-scale investigation of what really happened. But 5,692 ballots should have been delivered in these areas. 25% would have equaled 1,423 ballots. That could have reversed the election in my situation. But like I said, this goes on beyond me. There is also the question of the returning ballots returned by the postal office. There's no complete inventory of the names and addresses to identify individual voters and determine whether the ballots were truly undeliverable. There's the delay in conducting the risk limiting audit until May 17th. This is weeks after the election is supposed to be certified. This is critical information for the commission. It is a farce. If it's conducted after the certification, why have the audit? I mean, well, it's amazing. Such lax attitude towards accountability and integrity. Third-party access to the Dominion server, now this is really a red flag. And I am not an IT person, but John Hendry, to my right, does have over 20 years of the IT experience as an IT professional. But, here you have an employee that had unfettered access to the Dominion server. No one was informed this was going to be happen. A flash drive. This was witnessed by 5 observers. A flash drive was inserted in that server and then extracted and then given to an employee of Election Central. Now, I am not an IT expert, I can't say, but I don't know. There's a lot of questions. What was in the flash drive? Why did they go into the server? The explanations given when that was happening are different from what is set forth in the formal response by the municipal clerk. So it's not consistent. And there's a real mystery and there's a real question why that happened and why no one was informed that was going to happen. So we don't know what nefarious, if anything, conduct may have happened. I say towards the end of my supplement today, the importance of the commissioners to review all of the complaints, and I have just stated that. It also, in reviewing all of the complaints, sincerely, it will enable you to perform your statutory duties of advising the Assembly and Municipal Clerk on the conduct of elections and making recommendations relating to elections. And I also, at the very end, on page 6 of my supplement for today, I state that during yesterday's meeting, I heard that there was a request for statistical data for this election. The municipal clerk stated to the commission that the statistical data was not available that day or yesterday, but would be submitted to the assembly the following day. In addition, the municipal clerk stated that the statistical data was submitted to the assembly, but not to the commission. However, you must have access to all the data regarding elections, including the statistical data, in order to effectively perform your statutory duties. So in summary, I don't believe, and a lot of us don't believe, you have the necessary information and data, including the results of the audit, including the statistical data that you yourself have requested. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Vasquez. Before we take questions from other commissioners, let me just say at the outset, I really appreciate observers participating in the defense of election integrity. All of you here, plus some others who aren't here, have done a yeoman's job of doing that. And you help make everybody else better. And I think it's probably fair to say that staff that's here from the municipality plus other staff probably would say the same thing. Yes, it might be a nuisance to some because they have to respond to complaints, but I believe that this is just helping make our whole process better. And if we can get voters to understand that this is a valid system, or if it isn't, we need to fix it to make it that way. But if voters will understand that, then they may be more willing to participate. I would hope so. So anyway, I say that to commend you, and I thank you for being very professional in how you've done it. I do have, I guess, one or two questions. Maybe I can lead off with them, and then if there are others who have questions. Liz, you've run in that area before. The areas that are alleged to not have had all the ballots delivered, you've run in those specific neighborhoods. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. What's the, I should have looked it up this morning, what's the current margin between you and the other opponent? Was it like 1,500 votes?
It's less than that. A lot. Yeah, it's like 13 something. I have it.
Okay, about 1,300 votes.
Yeah.
I'm going to, and I saw the area before, I'm going to venture a guess that your margin in that area probably never exceeded 60-40. Is that your understanding?
I don't,
in memory?
Commissioner, I don't know. I'm not a math whiz or staff.
Okay. Well, I'm just trying to think through if any of this or if all of these together could possibly make a difference in the election result. And right now, I'm not seeing it. I am understanding your concerns and your expression of concern. But if somehow there's 1,400 ballots that were not delivered, if we conclude that would be a lot. But were not delivered, and the voters didn't remedy that by going to a vote center and voting. Then, if you're picking up 20% of that, you would need to. Well, first of all, you'd have to get just about all of those votes. Okay, and that's not realistic.
No.
Okay. Even I didn't do that. Didn't come close when I served that same area, and so I don't see, as much as I care about election integrity and the delivery of ballots, I don't see that would make a difference in who wins that race. It may make a difference in the final margin, perhaps. And I would like to see the statistical data to see how that area voted before, and if it really was suppressed and it's a lot diminished from surrounding neighborhoods. That probably tells us something. It tells us that the post office, if that's true, then it may tell us the post office is not telling the truth. Or something happened with several bundles of ballots. That's a possibility. Okay?
Commissioner, that is an issue, that you don't have access to the statistical data that's going to be submitted to the Assembly. And I think it handicaps the Commission in doing its, statutory duties. And also the fact that the audit has been scheduled weeks after the certification, it makes it meaningless, a meaningless exercise. So I encourage that the commission request the statistical data and request that the audit certainly not be scheduled after the date of certification. It seems that this whole process is rushed just to get, sacrificing the integrity of the process just to get it certified.
Yeah, yesterday when I asked that question, and maybe others did as well, I was somewhat surprised that we couldn't have it yesterday, but we could have it today.
Exactly.
And the most that we're really talking about is a shift of 200 votes, maybe counting a few others, 230 votes, which really isn't going to change the statistics that much, fraction of a percent, possibly. And so I will be very interested in seeing the breakdown of the votes to see if there was a substantial diminishment of votes in that area. Other commissioners, questions of Ms. Vasquez? Mr. Treadwell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Vasquez, for your bringing these issues to our attention. I think Lauren asked the question about whether or not the supposed 25% could change the results. I guess one question that the staff responded with is so forth is, do you have the names of those families that said that they didn't get them? And would you be willing to supply that to us? Even if we did not, get, we cannot order a new election. We could decide not to complete canvass, then the Assembly would probably have to wait for us to do that, but at some point the court could order that the canvass results be approved and so forth. But just in terms of fixing this going forward, at least, or doing an appropriate audit at the appropriate time, could we, do you have those names? And there were several observers who had some listed names.
No, we do.
And did you turn those into the city?
No, not yet.
No. Okay. My wife would say that she didn't get a ballot, and I realized that it was because her husband forgot to put it in the envelope to mail to her. There's a lot of people there. There are a lot of situations there with these kind of elections. On the statistical issue, I think that's very important. Maybe I should put it this way. We have a problem still in the state of Alaska where question ballots, once they're counted, are not really going back and appropriately assigned to precincts. So if you're trying to figure out what the vote is in a precinct, which is your right as a candidate, as a citizen to know that data is incomplete. And frankly, for you not to be able to see that right now, just as the votes are counted, because the computers can do it, I think is a problem. I think we have to fix that. This business of statistics don't come till later doesn't make any sense. I did want to ask you about the Dominion Guide thing. Okay. And I guess the question is, the city did give a response that the Dominion people were in to deal with an inconsistency on the radios, on the service areas. Do you feel that's an adequate answer? I understand your argument that you should have been notified, we should have been notified, that the city might have had an IT person there. Do you have any, I mean, first off, on the timing of that, could that have changed the results because weren't the results already reported? I'm just trying to figure out the timing of it, because maybe they change it in an audit situation, but for the time that they've been reported, if that Dominion guy were a crook, where would we see the change?
Commissioner, if you're willing to accept, John Hendry was the observer that has the IT experience. He's been an IT professional for over 20 years. He can address some of those issues.
It's been a long time for that, but I just find it very difficult to believe that in an election somebody is allowed to access a secured box inside a cage, whether it be a third party or anybody, and insert a flash drive into that, pull that flash drive, and go somewhere else. If I was a criminal, I would have already had the algorithm, and everybody knows about the algorithms they talk about, and how they count, how they steal, and how they do things like that. That was a perfect opportunity to go in there, correct that algorithm, delete that algorithm, and continue with the election. You'll notice that the results are the same after they manipulated whatever they did in it, whether they were allowing the function, what I was explaining to, or not allowed function, which was to delete something or whatever it was, because things didn't match. It doesn't matter with all of that stuff. If they deleted something out there that without our knowledge, you will never see it in an audit because it's already been done. Whatever was nefarious is gone. It's probably now gone. So you wouldn't tell. The results won't change at all. You can do what you want with that thing. The results won't change if it's already been done. The only thing I would think that might change any results at all would be, if it's not done in the machine, is to recount all the ballots. But then you're recounting the ballots with the same machine. Who verifies this flash drive? Were there any viruses on this flash drive? Is the same flash drive transferred from that machine to one of the machines over there that have internet access? Goes up to the sky wherever it goes, and someone loads something on it. I don't know. I can't comment to that. I have no idea. All I know is that access of that machine should have never happened. Should have never happened, because it creates this doubt, just like it's doing right now. I could think of all kinds of things that would go wrong with that. And that's basically what I have to say. And I have been in IT for 20 years, 22, actually close to 30 years. I worked for IBM at one point in time. I worked for Schlumberger at one point in time. And I worked for the state of Alaska for 22 years, and I was in the data department. Me and another fellow were the original implementers and designers of the state of Alaska IT network, as it integrated with the front-end processors, the front-end in the IBM system. So some of you may or may not know my name, some may, but I'm out there. If you have any questions on that, you can talk to the folks upstairs in the IT department. They'll let you know. Thank you.
John, I will just say that we still have the paper ballots available for comparison.
I had one other comment. I don't know who makes the decisions to access that machine, but I find it really hard to believe that municipal IT folks aren't involved in the administration of that machine or have knowledge of what goes in and out of that machine. I don't believe the election observers or the election folks, and it's no fault of their own, I don't think they're really qualified to call out and say, oh, this machine is broke, we need maintenance on it. Or I don't know where the qualifications are to do that. It's something that I think is a problem and it needs to be fixed. That machine should not be touched during an election.
Questions of Ms. Vasquez?
No, I'd like the other observer, Brenda, who observed an individual, same individual, setting up a laptop using electronics in a secure area.
So from my, Brenda Hasty, so from my observation, I came in that morning on the 19th, and observed, everything was quiet in here. I was the only observer present. And there was a gentleman I hadn't seen before here in the election center doing some work here in the adjudication area. He had his backpack there with him and his laptop open. And what I observed was he had a green progress bar on his screen that had been ticking away. When I inquired, he described the work that he was doing as verifying the database. Now, I've had some experience testing software in my profession, but I'm not an IT person, although I've worked with the IT project teams. So I wasn't really sure what that meant, verifying the database. He completed his work. He was here before I got here. That green progress bar was nearly done. It was probably like 75% done. Maybe about an hour later, he stepped away from his laptop, went and got an election worker, where he had on his laptop a login window. The election worker came in, entered credentials on that login window, and then stepped away. He resumed work. Some hours later, I think it was 4 hours after I arrived, other observers were starting to enter in, and then that's where we noticed that the server page was being accessed. Now, upon questioning the election workers, and this is where we learned that the man who was inserting the thumb drive into the server was an employee of Dominion. It was explained to us that the work that they were conducting was removing test data from write-in candidates. Now, this is where I do have experience from my profession of testing software extensively, working back goes back to the software creators in India, where we tested on site, and then continuing our work here in Anchorage. In the test environment, when you're testing software, you do not enter test data in a live environment, which this would be a live environment. If you're going to use test data, then you have a separate environment where you can test all you want, but you're not, you will still maintain your data integrity in your live environment where you're not entering that test data there. It's an exact copy of the live environment. So this immediately set red flags up that there was even in election process, that there is even any test data being entered into a live environment. You don't do that in software testing. That should be a standard practice. That, when we went back and read the initial response to that complaint, that part wasn't disclosed. That, I think somehow now it's gotten corrected, but the initial response that was received didn't match the answers that were coming back here on that day where we observed that. So there's been quite a few red flags that have were raised from that day on the 19th. That there was no municipal IT department present, that the server was being accessed, that test data was being entered into a live election server is a concern. There are a number of concerns here that I don't know how we move forward with feeling confident that this election was secure.
Mr. Lehman, we have your report of canvass for the assembly meeting prepared here, and we need for everybody's signatures on it. So this report provides the assembly with the number of rejected envelopes. It also indicates that the municipal clerk's office will be sending a notice of ballot rejection to the individual voters whose ballot was rejected as required by municipal code. It indicates that a future discussion with law enforcement, that you have requested a number of ballot envelopes to be held for discussion with law enforcement for possible election offenses. And then further comments from the commission may be forthcoming on observer complaints. And so at this time, I'm asking for a brief at ease in order to have all of the commission members sign this report.
Okay. I have prepared what I call an addendum to the canvassing report, which basically holds open our options to look at statistical data and some other things, so we can, at some time in the future, provide input to the Assembly and the Mayor, and do our job. Would now be an appropriate time to advance that and adopt it as an addendum to the report. I haven't seen the sentence that you have in there that you said that we preserve our options to provide further comments.
Is your addendum, has that been approved by all of the commission members?
Not yet, but I'm ready to offer it.
Okay.
Okay?
Do we need to make copies so that they know what they're voting on?
Yes. That's fine. You know how to get it? 5%. Okay. Oh, okay. Let's just take a few minutes while we talk about that. And I'll just say that I prepared that addendum. I'll consider it a draft addendum. Certainly could be amended based on what we heard today, but I prepared it on the basis of what was provided to us in writing yesterday and this morning before I came to this meeting, anticipating what the issues are. But we can amend it if the commission wants to, or you don't even want to adopt it. That's another possibility. But I thought it would be good for us to at least advise the Assembly that we could have more comments coming.
Is there Is there an email for your commission address that we could send written testimony to you guys about our observations? So I have something I'd really like to share with you, but I don't want to drag them out here.
I imagine there is an email address that where things can come to this election commission. I don't know what it is.
I don't want to go through Barbara Jones. I want to go directly to you guys.
I don't see why there shouldn't be. I just don't know what it is. Any of you been on the commission longer? Do you know? Okay.
What was the question?
The question is there an email address for somebody to send testimony to the commission but not go through the municipal clerk's office? I don't know.
I was going to say, let me look at the current working commission's website to see if that's already provided. If it's not, at one point, years ago, they were trying to protect email addresses for commissioners or personal email addresses. I don't know where that left off. So I'll go check through that website.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Treadwell.
I know we have your addendum to the report. I guess I've got a couple of questions that I'm trying to figure out. First off, if we didn't certify today or complete the canvas today, what happens?
Okay. Do we know that if we get Barbara here?
All right. Well, that's question number one. We obviously have a group of people who observed this who have asked us to consider not certifying it today until there's additional information. I tend to come from the point of view that Lauren expressed before, which is while these complaints are valid, we don't think it would have changed the results, so go ahead and certify and let's work on solving the problem. But I just want to know what happens if we said no. That's question number one. Question number two is why is the audit planned after certification?
Yep.
Okay, I mean, that's a question that I haven't seen an answer to. I mean, I can see a lot of problems that are kind of require long-term fixes. I'm not sure I can agree with Liz, my friend Ms. Vasquez on the pattern suggesting this requires a new election. But I do see real problems here. And I guess the question that I have for the clerk is, what happens if we didn't get 3 votes to certify today? Oh, yeah, I guess the other question I have is, why does the Assembly deal with this in executive session?
Exactly. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that we will.
And when are the ballots destroyed?
I've
30
already
days
asked that
after
question. I don't like the
certification.
answer to that one already, but go ahead. Chairman, I yield the floor.
So 30 days after April 5th? Or this?
Any other comments from commissioners? What, Jones? Okay.
The certification is not in executive session, it's on the consent agenda, it's item number 12 on the consent agenda tonight.
Which means if there's any objection by any member, it would come off the consent agenda, is my understanding. If that's the process the Assembly uses, that's how normally I see it. Consent agenda flies through. If somebody wants to pull it, then it becomes item of discussion under, I don't know, where the order of business is. Okay.
Commissioner, I have a comment for the record. I personally looked at the agenda and it explicitly states no public comment. It's item 12 of the agenda, at least as of Sunday in the wee hours. No public comments.
Well, and that would be the case for anything on the consent agenda.
Right.
Consent agenda means it's that we approve without discussion. Or at least without objection. I don't think there's usually discussion on the consent agenda.
Through the chair, most likely it will be pulled and there probably will be discussion but that it's still a consent agenda, you are correct.
Madam Clerk, what happens if you don't get 3 votes out of this commission to complete the canvass?
I have no idea.
New territory.
Everyone's looking at me. So maybe I can talk.
Do you have your microphone?
I have a microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem. Okay, can everyone hear me? Okay, so the question on the floor to the chair is what happens if the commission does not, and we've talked about the commission's role today. The commission understands it's not recommending certification or not certification. The commission prepares a report for the assembly, and then the assembly, based on the report, can approve or deny certification, right? So that's laid out in the code. So with regards to timeline, off the top of my head, having looked at this briefly this morning, when I was writing up this memorandum, which I have to say, it's not April 22nd. I wrote it very quickly. It was written this morning, so it's misdated. My apologies. But
So you're Jessica?
I'm Jessica.
Okay,
sorry.
got it.
Jessica Willoughby.
Yeah, you did introduce yourself, so I understand now. Thank you.
Jessica Willoughby, Assistant Municipal Attorney. I'm here regardless of who wins or loses, just looking at the code and the state law.
Sure.
As far as I can tell, and there might be other timelines implicated, I'm hesitant to say there's no consequence, but our code says that, I just had it up. The Election Commission and municipal clerk shall report the results of the commission's ballot review and election results at an assembly meeting as soon as practicable. And
and that's 2885040 in the certification of election process. And I was looking for state timelines. I didn't find anything quite yet in terms of, they sometimes have deadlines that would apply, but I haven't found it. So Ms. Jones might know if there's something I'm not thinking of here. But I think that answers. Is there any other questions on this?
No, so by you reading the memo, it's close to my understanding of what Pontius Pilate said, which is, yeah, I've listened, but it's up to somebody else. I think what you're saying is that we can hear these complaints, we can't act on them. We can report to the assembly that we've heard them, but we really have to say that, well, there's a bit of inconsistency that I'm just trying to figure out, okay? In your memo, you say we can report to the assembly there's a failure to comply with provisions of law, or if we knew it would be illegal, that election process is sufficient to change the outcome of the election, okay? So if I thought the fact that we didn't live stream 24 hours a day cast enough doubt on the integrity of the election results, I might move that we report them. Okay, I'm not sure I would do that, but I see that as an option. All right. Then the second thing is you say the complaints are informational purposes only to inform in our duties as an advisory and adjudicatory commission. All right. We, for example, acted on one of those complaints today and rescinded our motion of Friday. Or last week, or what Friday, it was preceding Tuesday, or well, it was Monday. But so I guess we followed that appropriately in our canvas. But what you're really saying here is that if Ms. Vasquez wants to say that there's a pattern of practices that resulted in an election that should be overturned or redone, that she has to take that case to the assembly or to the courts, not to this commission. So we, and it's not that I thought Pontius Pilate did the right thing, nor do I think that we should wash our hands of this matter, because we shouldn't. We have to advise on how to improve election practices. And I'm sure that there will be enough votes on this commission to advise on improvements. But I'm just trying to figure out what we do today with this vote that the clerk has asked us to take in the next few minutes.
Test the system.
Through the chair.
So I'm asking you, is the attorney, on the one hand, you've said if we think there's some kind of evidence of a failure to comply with provisions of law that's sufficient to change, we should tell the assembly that, and you say there's a high standard, but it doesn't say that we don't complete this canvas. It doesn't contemplate what we do with the canvas. Is our completion of the canvas a ministerial issue, or it's just, there's some people who thought that Michael Pence should be hanged because he didn't reject an election result. I'm not willing to be hanged, nor am I willing to I guess what I'm saying is I don't see enough evidence to overturn an election. I don't see enough evidence that there was. Is it possible that that bad things could have happened with that jump drive and previous work? Absolutely, it's possible. It's possible that there's 17,000 ballots out there that I haven't counted. Include some that shouldn't have been sent to me. I have no idea that there's not accounting. There's a number of audit functions that frankly, we may want to recommend in the future. Do we have any evidence that anything wrong happened to give us an indication that the results are wrong? I haven't seen it. So that's my challenge. I can see, the invisible man might have been here, but it's invisible to know that the invisible man was here. You know.
And respectfully through the chair, I don't see in our code that the election commission makes a recommendation whether to certify the election. I just don't see it. It's just not there. I mean, you can kind of read between the lines and imply that the election has an authority, and that's. I think instead our code envisions if there are concerns with the integrity of the election, that it be addressed after certification. And that's in contrast under state law for municipalities. The default is a concern can be brought up during the canvass, unless the municipality adopts another way of doing it. And we've adopted another way of doing it, I think. I think our code indicates that if someone wants to contest the election, they can bring it to the assembly, and the assembly can vote to whether they hear it or not. And then if the assembly refuses to hear it, the complainants have another recourse. They can go to the courts and say, hey, this isn't right, and they can make their case yet again. So I think that's the protection our municipality, our government code envisions for this type of complaint. Because, I mean, I'm just guessing here because I wasn't part of the drafting, but I imagine it's a matter of efficiency because you don't want to have this rush until you certify or not certify. And you want to take your time to investigate those sorts of allegations.
Jessica, I have a question. I'm sorry.
Sure.
So, we, as observers, we can't bring it to the commission. We need to bring it to the assembly, even though the assembly the clerk works for the assembly, and the assembly are some of the incumbents. Correct?
Yeah.
So we're bringing our concerns to the people that were on the ballot.
Yeah.
So would they would excuse themselves from the vote?
I can't speak to whether the assembly members would excuse themselves. That's up to the assembly members and the chair. But I will say that that's not the end of the recourse, because then the code contemplates you have an appeal right, and the state statute gives an appeal right to the court. So that's not final.
If you take it to court.
Thank you. So, can I make one more comment on that? But I need a break.
Yeah.
Thanks. This is Sammy Graham, for the record, through the chair. So I'm going to quote Barbara, and she wrote this today, the clerk. She said that a risk-limiting audit is a valuable tool to detect problems with election outcomes with high degree of statistical confidence. Properly conducted, post-election audits increase voter confidence and add another layer of security. That brings me back to, why are we doing the audit after the election? If we have that tool that she says is a valuable tool, why not use it to help certify the election?
Through the chair, for the record, Ms. Vasquez, Title 28.120.060 sets forth the duties of the commission. It is clear, I'm not stating here that the commission has the role of certifying the election. Your role is to be in an advisory capacity to the assembly and the municipal clerk to make recommendations relating to the elections and to, review the results of the election. So that is your role. So it is totally within your statutory duties to make recommendations. And if your recommendation is, we're rushing this process because we don't have an audit and we have questions about certain issues still to be heard and resolved and discussed thoughtfully and not rushed through. I mean, I was really stunned when I'm in front of my computer. Don't do this every day. But it was past 11 o'clock at night on Sunday, and I'm getting well, it was after 8, I was getting these flurries of responses, at the last minute when the commission meeting was the following morning at 10 o'clock. So some of you probably just had hours to consider some of these responses and didn't actually see the complaints filed by the observer. So your role is to advise the assembly and the municipal clerk. Your role is to provide recommendations. It is totally within your statutory duties to say to the assembly, it is premature, before an audit, to certify the election. It is premature. We have certain questions to deal with and certain discussions to be had. We've been trying to be rushed. This is not acceptable. You are an independent body. You do not work for the municipal clerk. You do not work for the assembly. You were appointed all by whoever was in the mayor's office at the time you were appointed. So you are a check and balance. You're not a rubber stamp to what the municipal clerk wants you to do. You're not a rubber stamp for what the assembly may wish to do. You are a totally independent body, and as such, you should exercise that beautiful mandate. It should not be wasted. And frankly, you are standing between bad practices, lack of integrity in the voting process, and the people in this community. So you have a very, very responsible role. And I'm here to try to convince you that you should exercise that discretion. We all know you cannot certify the election, but you could recommend to the assembly that it's too premature to certify the election, especially since the audit has been scheduled several weeks. And I don't know why it was scheduled several weeks away, but it's absurd to have an audit after the certification. Yeah. It's totally a farce.
You got 10 minutes before you.
Okay, we are coming up on our expiration time, and
Mr. Chairman, on the audit issue, we've already seen a kind of set of conflicts between state and municipal practices. In the state practice, you certify the election, and then somebody asks for a recount, because you can't ask for a recount on an election that hasn't been finished counting. If we finish counting today, you have the right as a candidate to ask for a recount, ask for a court to overturn this, but you can't do that until we do this. So, for that reason, we could certify. We could complete the canvass. On the other hand, we could also decide not to complete the canvass, and say we'll complete the canvass for all races except Sand Lake, where we don't know if everybody got their ballots, which would cause a bit of an interesting issue, Mr. Chair, and it'd be a little bit harder line than what you suggested in this language. I guess what I'm saying here is that in some cases, and I've seen this as an election official, even though I might not like what the result is, you can't really have the airing of the problems or even the audit until after the results are there. So that may explain what, at least in the state case, the audit does come later. The recount does come later. So that may be why it's in municipal code that way. The canvass board has to say, okay, here's a number. Now take a pot shot at that number. Okay. And we've done the best to say, which votes should be in there and which votes should be out of there. But it's not really our job as a canvass board to say this election's not good because people didn't get their ballots. I mean, it's our report. It's certainly our job as a commission to go back and say, Assembly, go fix that problem. That's dumb. Sends everybody a certified mail. I don't know what it's going to be, but obviously there's a problem. So I don't know if that was helpful, but as I think it through, that's probably why the audit comes later.
7 minutes.
we are running out of time, and if we're going to act on this today, we're going to need to extend. Can we get our work done in half an hour?
No, sir. I am going to ask you again if you could please excuse me. If you have any questions for me, I'm more than happy to answer them, but I need to, you know, I incorporate this statement in your
Yeah,
report. I included a statement, but.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to second your nomination second your motion on the statement, and so that it's properly on the floor. And I'd like to ask the clerk a question just real fast.
Okay, motion's been made. I move to adopt the addendum offered, and Mr. Treadwell seconds. It is before us under discussion. Mr. Treadwell, question of the clerk.
Ma'am, to ask the clerk, why were observers not brought in on the Dominion guy working on the? I mean, you've read the complaint. I'm not sure I'm not sure I feel the answer was complete. How come somebody was in that cage without observers being told, us being told, and since the result didn't change anything, why was he in there now as opposed to later?
Through the chair, I think, you know, Ralph was here. Ralph, do you want to say anything about that?
Ralph wasn't here.
Ralph was not here.
Nope.
In fact, I was.
At the very end.
I was.
You weren't here in the morning.
Nope.
I was here when all the observers were. Well, through the chair, I was here for part of it, and it was the Dominion employee technician who was had a thumb drive that was prepared by the staff here that was inserted to make a correction that was shown to the group by giving them a before election results printout and an after election correction printout. So it was shown to the group that there was no, well, Mr. Henry has a lot more IT experience than I do, but it was shown that there was no mischievous or nefarious plot. It was really to make a correction. The correction was shown to the observers, and now we have the same concerns being expressed again. We are very glad to work with the observers to explain it, but I don't think we're going to explain it in the next 5 minutes.
Through the chair, one other thing I would add is that I don't think any municipal agency has. I don't notify the observers when the janitors come, and I do not notify the observers when the project manager comes. That is not something that we do. It is not something that we anticipated doing. MOAIT has been here, and we have not notified the observers. It is not something that we thought of. And I would like to clarify one thing that Mr. Dwyer said, and that is that there was nothing introduced into the system. What happened instead was we downloaded a copy of the election. We copied the election and tested the fix on the technician's, his company laptop, which we talked about, made sure it was secure, and also made sure it had two-factor authentication. He tested it on his computer and it worked, and then we just implemented it. We didn't load that back into our machine. We were practicing on his machine, and when it worked, then we just went in and did it on ours. There was nothing downloaded or added to the meeting. It was a copy of the election. That's all we did.
We have before us a motion to adopt this addendum. under discussion, I will note that there, when I drafted it, I thought what I was saying was correct and may not be quite correct. I said these do not allege failures to comply with the provisions of law, and we heard Ms. Vasquez say that she alleges 2 violations of law. And so it may be slightly incorrect, and whether other people consider the mistakes made, if they were, or informalities, to be fairly minor, I guess that is my judgment call. That may not necessarily be everybody's judgment call about that. But I looked at it in total and just asked myself, will any of these really impact the results of the election? And my conclusion is no. I mean, it won't reverse the results. It may change slightly the vote totals, but my conclusion is it won't change the results of who wins or on the propositions on whether they pass or fail.
You're going to time out in a minute.
Yeah, and we're close to timing out. Without objection, could we set this motion aside and take up the issue of extending? Hearing no objection. They extend for another half hour? Do it half hour at a time? Okay. Commissioner Ireland moves to extend half an hour. Commissioner Nelson seconds. Any objection? Without objection, that passes. Okay, we have the item before us. We can either address it and vote on it, or we can amend it. Your choice. I'm okay with leaving it as it is, but I don't mind amending it.
On the language that you provided, I guess the only word change I would say is that while we say we do not allege failures to comply with the provision of law, I think I would say that, and that alleged failures to comply with the provision of the law are unlikely to change the outcomes. Okay, I mean, I think what you're saying is there are allegations. We're certainly going to look into them, but even if they were correct, we don't see a likelihood that they are ready to change the outcomes.
Okay, I will agree with that. That is a better way to say it, especially in light of what we heard today. And so the amendment would be after minor, delete the words do not and insert and then put a D on the end of allege, and alleged failures to comply with the provisions of law. Take out the word and.
Well, why don't we say alleged failures of election officials? Comply with the provisions of law are unlikely.
Well, we've used the term of the election team. Okay. I don't know if staff are considered election officials, so maybe we should say alleged failures of the election team.
Sure.
Any objection to that motion of the amendment? Everybody understand it? And alleged failures of the election team to comply with provisions of law, delete and, are unlikely to change the outcomes, including if the candidate races or issues. Okay? We have, that would be amendment number 1. Any discussion? Everybody understand it? Okay. Any objection to the amendment?
I have a question. No objection to the amendment. But didn't Jamie on whatever word sign? I can't hear you. Okay, wasn't Jamie going to read something, or was it that we are on the signature page?
It's a much briefer.
Do we need to put this in the minutes? My question.
Time-wise,
Well, time-wise, they're going to put this in, or they're not going to get a vote to certify.
Okay. I consider this to be an important statement to really highlight, especially the Sand Lake Jewel Lake issue, But as well, there are other issues. I just consider it important for us to flag this for the assembly.
Can I just clarify? Yes, I usually don't debate that. Deal with the one that you're comfortable with. We don't have time to debate.
So, I think you're, Madam Chair, I think my fellow commissioner's point is a good point. I don't see what the clerk wrote as inconsistent with what Lauren's putting forward. It just basically elaborates further.
Okay. Is there any objection maintained for adoption of Amendment 1? Hearing none, the amendment's adopted, and that brings the addendum before us. Any objection to the adoption of the addendum to the canvassing report? Without objection, that motion carries, and that will be added. We will.
Yeah.
Do you want to comment now, or
Mr. Chairman,
brief at ease?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, you say addendum to canvassing report offered by Commissioner Lehman. I would say addendum to canvassing report unanimously adopted by the commission, and I make that motion.
Seconded by Commissioner Ireland. Without objection, that passes as well. We'll take a brief at ease, and then I guess the next thing is we need to see the canvassing report to sign, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's the first draft. If you'd like to take a gander at that, I will add the statement as amended. Is that what, does anybody have the amendment written down for me?
Yeah, here.
Okay. Do you want to come in?
Yeah, we're at a brief at ease.
Are you guys going down?
I think that's
Yeah.
I try to stay away from
You have to stay away from it.
the last time I went, we didn't listen to them.
welcome to the club.
Call it.
Yes, I know.
How is the date of certification? Who said That's right. Okay, this was the day after we were here until 1:00 in the morning. 11:50. They came in much later because I didn't leave until 2:18. But I came in 11:45 because we were going to do the audit. Not the audit, but the adjudication. Barbara had said.
You get his clock in.
And nothing happened. But then again, nothing happens on the schedule. Huh? But I was pissed because Barbara
I remember because I called or texted you, remember? Yeah, I remember.
And I'm like, what is this guy? Nobody would answer. There was not a liaison.
So what is it, 210?
I can't, later tonight, I can't be there. Two resolutions that are passed here. Right, yeah.
Forest Mars would say high school. Used to have.
Right.
I couldn't find high school.
Oh, there's enough balance.
This is a safe which somebody said helps in your hand.
destroy the ballots, or when do they destroy it? And then if they destroy it, what if they destroy it before May 17th? That's an assumption. Certification will be what is the definition after the election, 30 days after the election? And I agree with you guys. There's not one we can do about changing one of my questions, sent out 210,000 ballots. They got back 18,000 ballots. They just sent back to the post office to return right. There's 70,000 voted ballots, and say a couple thousand rejected. That's 90,000 ballots. There's 119,000 ballots outstanding. Where do they all go?
Or they'll be sent to us next year. So
and this is another thing. If you take 25% of those as non-delivered, that's 29,000 ballots.
that's why I support if you ask for an absentee ballot. Yes, we're selling an absentee ballot.
It's always been that way. It's always been that way, right?
Well, you gotta think right, we're not allowed to cast even if it's requested. In the state. But the other thing is that all absentee ballots are burned on again.
Yeah, but it's okay. So here you go. You're ready to sign.
I know, this process is so complicated. Oh my gosh. We've been here for 2 weeks. You get signature mismatches. You look at it, yeah, that didn't match Gucci. But the whole process is so I mean, I try to think like a criminal.
Well, I'll put it this way. Millions of dollars. And I watch have somebody just watched two criminal guys. All of them they had was
I mean, just the fact that they have devices in here when you follow the cables, you have no idea how they're hooked up to the switches in the back. That's what I spent 22 years doing.
I didn't even think about that.
Putting this stuff together. And you have computers over there that have internet access to flash drive there. There's something that chain of custody for that. You know yourself, when you put a flash drive in your computer, no matter how darn well do a scan against that thing before it ever goes in your computer. Don't tell me what goes on.
I think I lost the photos.
Oh, yeah. And what is it? The state database has been hacked 2 or 3 times.
So we just need to sign.
Should have still the original unadvertised security assessment that was done on the state. That's 25 photos, 25 years old. Oh my God, this is what the people screaming because nobody was paying attention. And when it was all over, these guys, these professionals were all over the servers of the state. We had an instance where we went to Westfield.
Are you ready to sign? We're trying to get copies made.
We're just trying to see what happens if we do this.
I don't care. I'm still going to the assembly.
Hard work. Hey, I think.
Okay. Let me get you. Barbara, we have one. Thank you.
When would I not have a pen or a pencil?
Actually, any text that I have you about
That's probably for your driver's license for your runner.
No, because you're here in person.
Right? I know.
The rejects are more this year. I think last year it was 1,400, so I think we've reduced there too. Oh, we can do more on that. I'm giving the first absolutely. What's all right. So, you see, because I do you made it. Next year I will.
So,
Yeah, well, we'll make you sure you have something to do that.
17,000, 100,000 pilots.
Oh, I don't think, but they're going to, but I don't think so.
Oftentimes turn on 1%.
okay. We're back in order. And according to the revised agenda that I was given this morning, we have A, B, C, D, and E, which I believe we've covered already by taking up the omnibus bill. We have at least been presented and discussed each of the other issues. Is everybody okay with that? Without objection, we will move on. We are through new business, and we're.
May I comment about the omnibus bill? As a member of the public, I'm not part of the observers, right?
Please do. Go ahead. Come up and find a microphone.
Hi, it's Joyce Anderson, and what I would like to say is the Sand Lake area with the ballots, envelopes not being delivered is really very concerning, so I agree with that. I would also like to point out, though, and I don't know if they did this with their survey, it also depends on whether those individuals were registered at their current address. And if they weren't, they wouldn't have received the ballot. Was that asked when you did the survey?
I'm not sure.
Okay, that's a very important question because the 25% seems very high to me. So by providing the names to the clerk's office, what they can do is they can check to see whether they're registered or not. And then my second question is, did you offer them options on how to vote while you were doing the survey as well?
Options were offered.
Yeah, Dan Smith.
They told us because it was pretty late in the process. They They knew their ballots weren't coming, so they had to find an alternate means to vote.
Right, and I guess what I'm asking is, did you tell them how they could vote, whether it be an ABC, or they could come down here, or wherever? And so you offered them an alternative other than receiving their ballot in the mail?
They did receive that information, yes.
Okay, all right. Well, I'd be curious to see what the percentage really is after they do look at the names that are submitted to see whether those individuals are registered to vote or not, because to me that's a very important factor, and I didn't hear that, so that's why I wanted to ask that question. Thank you.
Thank you. We're down under member comments. So, anybody want to provide comments for the good of the order?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Treadwell.
Yeah. I guess my biggest question is scheduling on what happens next. On the issue for the commission, I know that what we've sent to the assembly is notice that we're going to give them some comments. We know that we've got a date set for discussion with law enforcement and camera. So I just want to know what is our process going to be if the election is certified to move forward on this. So that's a question that I have, number one. Number two, we have a motion that said we're not going to destroy any of these ballots until we've kind of sorted through and done that report. But I'm concerned about what else is likely to be destroyed. If there's 17,000 undeliverable ballots, did we write their names down and send it to the state saying these people aren't where they say they are, or where your records say they are? I think it would be good before any destruction of any ballots is that we get a simple report that says we've got that mess here, that's what we've done with them, now they're going to the shredder. This mess here, we're holding on to these, so you can look at that. It would be nice to see it all consistent in one place. So those are my two comments.
I am going to suggest that each of us write down comments or thoughts on what we think ought to be done for improvements to the election process. One of the ones we talked about yesterday was the whole issue of marks and how we confirm that. My opinion is that's a weak area that needs fixing of some type.
Yep.
Commissioner Torkelson, any comments? Okay, Commissioner Ireland, Chairman Ireland, I should say.
No.
Commissioner Nelson?
No.
Yeah, my comment is thanks a lot to Chairman Ireland for putting me in the hot seat for dealing with all this work.
Did we get an answer on the email? Did we get an answer on the direct
Oh,
email?
No, I have not gotten it yet.
You don't-
Can I relay that to you?
Yeah.
If you want, I would be happy to offer my email and then I can forward it to the rest of the country.
Okay, I would appreciate that.
There's open meetings things.
Right.
They ought to
Yeah.
have. They ought to go to one thing that goes straight to the five of us.
Yes, exactly.
That way nobody can challenge the fact that you sent it to us.
Absolutely.
I've probably offered enough comment during the meeting, so we'll kick it up to item 7, audience participation. Is there anyone who feels compelled to offer comment? Thank you for being here, members of the audience. You help ensure that this democratic republic is going to continue to function. Very important. We have to consistently guard the integrity of the election. Thank you for being part of it. No further business to come before us. We finally are adjourned after working at this for 3 days. Well, more than that, but actually meeting during 3 days. We're adjourned.